Dr. David Hulse, one of my favourite people in the entire world, I have to say. It's an absolute privilege to have you here at the Landrace Studios at CycleFit in Store Street. And,
it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, and try and wring you dry if we can.
The latest in this series of collaborations with CycleFit's Phil Cavell is with a sports medicine consultant who helps amateur cyclists come back from injury and also professional riders.
One of your jobs is as a team physician for World Tour Team EF Pro.
I've been a team doctor in the World Tour for, I think, 8 years now.
This video is ideal for New Year, advising amateur cyclists how to factor the hidden stress of everyday life into their training and how older athletes can adjust their training load as their bodies change.
We need to recognise that we have less capacity to adapt to a training stimulus which is either a large volume or high intensity, or a combination of the two. It's almost a case of less is more.
We're lucky to have your input because you see two very discrete cohorts. One cohort are very talented, genetically talented young men and women who are living their life and making a living riding a bicycle and racing it. And then you've got your other cohort who you see in your clinics who come to you with a particular problem that they want you to fix. And the chances are by the time they get to you, they've probably seen more than one person. You're not the beginning of the journey, you're probably actually the end of the journey in a sense. So I'm interested to know how the professional cohort presents to you with a problem and how the amateur presents to you. Is it a different problem? Is it the same problem?
So the answer is that there are similarities, but there are also differences. If we look specifically at acute injuries, so the broken bones we pick up when we crash, for example, they will be treated in almost the same way, according to the same principles, whether we're dealing with a pro cyclist or whether we're dealing with one of us. Where things change is with amateur or recreational riders. I suppose there are two areas. One is the influence of degenerative problems. Well, most of the people I see, that is degenerative changes in the musculoskeletal system, which can influence how overuse injuries develop, how our interaction with the bike changes as we age and we physically change. So I see a lot of injuries which are slowly developing and are related to our age-related changes and life-related changes as athletes and as human beings. The other side is really the context. Professional cyclists are doing their job effectively. Training, fueling, recovering is their daily life, and whether they manage that well, or whether that's also supported by an extensive team behind them, a team of nutritionists, sleep specialists, biomechanists, injury rehab specialists. Professional cyclists are living the dream, or living our dream, let's say. Whereas the rest of us have other life demands, and that changes the problems that can occur.
Having a job that is not cycling creates a major difference between us amateurs and the pros. That immediately puts external, yet often hidden stress on our bodies. Pros aren't immune to this, but it's part of their job and their teams to manage it.
I was thinking on the way in to do this interview about how we can do the basics right.
Yeah.
And the 3-word phrase that we often hear is train, eat, sleep.
Yeah.
And that is a perfect framework for getting the basics right. And I thought on the way in, perhaps for a midlife athlete, a midlife recreational athlete who also has demands, work, life, family demands on top of wanting to ride and perform on their bike, Perhaps a better way of thinking about it is ride, eat, sleep rather than train, eat, sleep. And perhaps train fits in better with train, fuel, recover, which I suppose is, you could say, is more of a scientific source, more of a sports science, data-driven process. And I think the challenge for anybody as a midlife athlete is really deciding which of those they are. Because perhaps if you try and train, fuel, recover alongside all the other things you need to do, your 60-hour week, your family commitments and so on, life stresses, perhaps you're setting yourself up to fail. Maybe that's slightly harsh, but perhaps a better way of saying is it requires a lot of commitment. It requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of programming. And there's very little breadth to accommodate all the things that will go wrong, the meetings that overrun, the family crisis. So perhaps an easier way of seeing it for those of us who enjoy riding our bikes and are not professional athletes, we don't have to train for a job. Perhaps an easier way of seeing it is to think of it as ride, eat, sleep, rather than train, fuel, perform. Perhaps that's slightly simplistic.
No, I like it. So you've got these two paradigms. So the pro athletes you deal with in your day job, they are in the paradigm of train, eat, recover, or train,
fuel, recover.
So they're in that paradigm, but they're perfectly set up to succeed in that paradigm, aren't they?
Absolutely. They have all the support within their World Tour team environment to train. They're coached, they're supported. They have a very high level of nutritional support these days. The teams who have been very successful over the last 5-10 years or so are those, the larger budget teams have been able to invest heavily in nutritional support, for example. And that's often what has made the difference on the ground in terms of performance. And sleep. If your job is to train and fuel and sleep, then sleep becomes part of your daily plan.
Yeah. So what you're saying is if we try and set an expectation for ourselves as midlife athletes that we're going to train, fuel, recover, that's just actually probably not sustainable in the long term. And that we should be looking for the paradigm where we're as you said it, ride, eat, sleep. It's coming down in terms of expectation. But if we're training for this Marmot or this Etape or a Hope Route or some big event that we've always dreamt of, and we want to dip our toe in that pro bucket of train, fuel, recover, can we? And then if we can, we have to expect to change a lot of variables around our life, don't we?
We can do it. I'm not saying that we can't do it. No. We can do it. And many of us do very successfully train for marmots and marathoners and etapes. But it's more critical to get the basics right. The way to get it right is to maximize the benefit from the small amount or the minimum amount of time. So what training can we do? What intervals on a bike can we do, what endurance sessions we can do, which maximize the adaptation we're trying to achieve whilst minimizing the load and the risk of additional stress. And how that might look on paper is what might seem to be a very low volume of training over a week, for example. Perhaps 8 to 10 hours, or perhaps even 5 to 7 hours of training per week is going to be far more sustainable and far more effective than what we think we should be doing, which is miles and miles during a winter season, for example.
This is a key concept for amateur cyclists and runners. Our bodies get stress from work, commuting, diet, health, relationship expectations. And these limit the adaptations our bodies can handle, particularly as we age. This hidden stress is called allostatic load, which medically is defined as the cumulative burden of chronic stress and life events. It involves the interaction of different physiological systems at varying degrees of activity.
So going back to allostatic load, this idea that we're kind of embedding layers of stress like sediment that compresses down, it's self-evidently the case that a younger biological unit can process those layers of sediment faster than me and faster than you, right?
Yes, I would agree. I mean, we recover and adapt much better when we're younger. Or to put it the other way, as we age, as we progressively age, our capacity to adapt to training, to recover from training load, to process things cognitively, all of those abilities very slowly change, and that clearly needs to be recognised.
If I'm a midlife athlete and I'm putting a point on the map, okay, I'm 50 now, 55, 63. How should I be adapting my behaviour based on the fact that my competence and ability to deal with allostatic load is on a negative flight path? Help.
I think the most important thing is to recognise it.
Yeah, point on the map.
Quite simply, point on the map, recognise it and acknowledge it.
Yep.
In our mid-50s, in my case, we are not as rapidly adaptable and resilient as we were in our mid-20s. We've talked before about how varying our training as we get older can help to overcome some of the natural changes that develop as we age. Muscle fibre loss, bone density we mentioned.
Because I say in the book that one of my ways of dealing with it, I suggest, is that if you've got 7 days of the week, knock off one because that should be a recovery day. You've got 6 days left. Probably only one of those should be intense interval training. Probably 4 of them should be kind of lower level. It's harder to recover as you get older from intense efforts than it is endurance efforts. So the recovery is really important, which means that you need to do more recovery and less big stimulus inputs. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right. And if we take a 7-day week and we allow for 1 rest day,
get rid of 1.
I would perhaps say 2 rest days might be better.
Okay, like that.
And we need to recognise, we need to do 2 things. Ideally, we need to recognise that we need more time to recover from a given stimulus. So perhaps the intensity should be modified.
Yeah.
Perhaps
Agreed.
the volume needs to be, we need to recognise that we have less capacity to adapt to a training stimulus which is either a large volume or high intensity, or a combination of the 2. So it's almost a case of less is more. Less is very definitely more.
Agreed.
For the midlife athlete.
Yes.
So again, with the 7-day week, perhaps 3 days on the bike rather than 4 would allow us to get the greatest benefit out of the training or riding we do on those 3 days. And of course, we want to incorporate a resistance training day into our weekly plan.
To your point, we probably need to have 2. So we've got 3 days on the bike, so then we've got 2 days resistance, and you wanted 2 days recovery. We're done, aren't we?
I'm going to slightly modify the 2 days of resistance, and we'll have we'll have 1 day of resistance training to maintain our strength, and we'll have another day of Pilates.
Okay, controversial.
To preserve and to maintain mobility and flexibility, which again we progressively lose as we age.
And coordination as well.
Yes.
I see. Okay. So So we're not as tolerant of the allostatic load, so we need to create a strategy to deal with that. So we're clearing it out the way and allowing our body to move back into a homeostasis or equilibrium. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And balancing what we want to do as recreational midlife athletes, balancing that alongside the other demands on our systems, the other stressors, life, work, our ability to recover.
Summarising, and this is just a reference point for some people, 3 days on the bike with only one focused on intensity, 2 recovery days, a strength day enough to stimulate adaptations, a Pilates day for flexibility and mobility. And there is another key component.
When I wrote an article a couple of years ago on sleep, in fact it was a 2-part article, and the head of the Olympic Sleep Centre in Canada, who I was talking to, urged me to look at sleep over a week, not a night. You know, everyone has an idea of how much sleep they need, 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, and look at it over a week. So are you an 8-hour person, or are you a 9-hour person, or you're a 7-hour person? So if you're a 7-hour person, which is on the lean end, as you said, that's 49, 50 hours a week. So you have to actually make sure that you, over the week, have 50 hours. So if you hack it one day because you went on your turbo trainer at midnight, then you need to find a way to bring that hour back into your, into your plan, if you like.
Into your overall recovery.
Correct. Because, as he said, sleep is in terms of performance, sleep is the #1 recovery tool. That's it.
Absolutely. Sleep is the best recovery modality.
Fine.
We can talk about compression. We can talk about cold therapies. We can talk about ice baths. We can talk about massage. We can talk about all sorts of things.
It's all bollocks without sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Sleep is the #1 recovery modality, and we need to get enough of it. But as people with other lives as well, outside of in addition to our cycling, we need to accept and not become overly stressed about the fact that there'll be some nights where the sleep is poor quality. Either a reduced amount of sleep because we had a late meeting, had a family commitment, did a session on the turbo trainer at 11 p.m. We need to recognise, it helps if we are able to accept that our training is not going to be as supposedly perfect, in inverted commas, as a professional's training.
So, given that we need the same amount of sleep, I'm 63, you're 54?
55.
55. So, given that we need the same amount of sleep, if I'm a person that needs 7 or 8 hours and it's not going to change over my lifespan, there is a sense in which the quality of the sleep changes as you get older, isn't there? So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, the recommendations for the amount of, there are recommendations from sleep specialists as to the amount of sleep that we require at different ages, but really from 18 to mid-60s or so, the recommendation doesn't change. It's somewhere between 7 and 9 hours, and most of us will get roughly what we need because we have an awareness of how much sleep we as individuals require. But what does change as we age is the quality of sleep. Sleep disturbance due to health changes, due to hormonal changes, due to all the other factors that might prey on our minds while we're lying in bed. What changes is the quality, what can change is the quality of sleep. And again, that is something that we need to adapt our behaviours to.
Because as I understand it, if you look at the phases of sleep, the 4 phases of sleep, we don't actually produce growth hormone until we get into this deep, slow wave sleep phase, right?
Correct.
So if we're going to have this super compensation where we've given this massive training dose and we want the dividend, we won't get the dividend paid to us until we get into that slow wave sleep, right? So we need to get into that phase of sleep to get the payback on all the hard stuff we just put our bodies through the day before.
Deep sleep or slow wave sleep
Yeah.
is where adaptation and physical repair occurs. And that is physical repair on a daily basis from all the things that happen to us in a normal day, in a normal life, and also physical repair in an athletic way in terms of training adaptation. So the physical changes, the physical repair occurs during slow wave sleep or deep sleep.
How do we get there then? I want to get there. I want to get there.
We get there by allowing ourselves enough time to be able to get there. And I suppose that means time in bed, or at least recognizing that we do actually need 7 to 9 hours sleep to give us a chance of having a decent amount of deep wave sleep, rather than thinking we can manage on 5 or 6 hours, which unfortunately will catch up with us at some point.
Of course. And alcohol obviously is going to destroy that architecture, isn't it? If we start drinking, then we're automatically going to hamper ourselves getting into that.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol has a very dramatic effect on our sleep cycles, and what it does is alter the natural cycle between deep wave sleep, REM sleep that we naturally go through a number of times during the night. Very typically also decreases the overall amount of sleep we get because we wake. And there's quite an interesting reason for that, which is called REM rebound. When we go to sleep, having had a drink or a few too many drinks, we rapidly descend into a very, very deep sleep. We're almost deeper than deep sleep, if that makes sense. When we're in slow wave or deep sleep, we would naturally gradually come up, our brain activity would gradually come up towards REM sleep. What alcohol does is it puts us into a much deeper sleep, from which there is then a very rapid rebound, and the suddenly waking in the middle of the night
Sweating
at
and
3
thirsty.
a.m. sweating and thirsty occurs for a reason, and it's not because you're thirsty.
No.
It's and that's called REM rebound.
Right.
And overall, the effect is simply that it decreases the effective amount of repair and adaptation that we are able to get from sleep, and also disturbs the overall amount of sleep. So REM sleep is disturbed. During REM sleep, our brain processes all the things that happen to us. It's the time when we dream, for example. And it's the time when we dream, the time when memory is developed. We lose a lot of that with alcohol-induced sleep.
Yeah. And one more thing that the sleep doctor who ran the Olympic Centre there said to me about how we can optimize sleep as athletes is think about, are you naturally a morning person, a lark, or are you naturally an owl? Are you naturally an early morning person, or where are you on that spectrum? We're all somewhere on that spectrum. And then try and configure your life's biggest demands around that chronotype. And one of the big things they do at their sleep centre is change the chronotype. So if you're somebody who's actually naturally an owl, but your life as a professional bike racer doesn't allow that, you actually need to move to being a lark.
You can shift it.
You can, but you can't shift it quickly, and it has to be done in a considered and structured way. And I find this fascinating. If you look back upon the crappy mistakes I've made in my life athletically and other mistakes, chronotype is part of it. I was definitely an evening criterion person. I was not a morning person. Whereas now I've had to change my life, and my chronotype now is a morning person. Early, my best writing is done 6 to 9 in the morning. My best everything is done 6 to 9 in the morning. Everything else is a shit show. So it's interesting. So that idea that as midlife athletes we think about what our chronotype is and then adjust ourselves around it, or actually change our chronotype.
It's a very interesting.
It's a
It's a
supposition.
very
It's a
interesting
supposition.
difference between people, and I would say that again has huge relevance to our ability overall to train for high level events alongside working life.
Yes.
Do we get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and train then, or do we try and squeeze in 2 hours on a turbo trainer between 9 and 11 p.m.
After dinner and you've had a bottle of wine.
After dinner and you've had a bottle of wine. Do we get it right?
Yeah.
And more importantly, if we get it wrong, does that actually cause problems? Does that measurably affect our recovery and adaptation from the training? Are we actually getting a benefit from the training we're doing, or are we simply overloading stress by adding another layer of training stress?
And that's to Nigel's point from the last one. His point was, as a cardiologist, training is only worth doing when the body is relaxed and rested.
Absolutely.
Everything you do to the body in terms of training stress when it's not relaxed and rested is a waste of time. It's all negative. You're just adding to the allostatic load one more layer of sediment, one more layer of damage. So everything, so for the big takeaway for the midlife athlete, should be only train when you're relaxed and rested.
Yeah.
Am I being too purist?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think we could recognise that we need to understand as individuals when it's right to train, when we are going to get the best out of our training, knowing what the other demands on our lives are.
One other thing, just to finish off here, everybody in this room, front of camera and behind camera, is a midlife cyclist. And we've all of us ignored things, pains, things, warning signs, light bulbs going off. I mean, surely that has to be the takeaway for all of us and everybody, that as midlife athletes, we're not in a position to ignore anything, really.
We're aging, we're changing physically, our cardiovascular systems are changing, our metabolic systems are changing. All the health issues that we're unfortunately genetically predisposed to are starting to appear. And it's inevitably going to be better if we can address problems as they arise. The knee pain, the slight breathlessness, riding up a small rise, these can be managed, but they could be warning signs. I think that would be the first thing to say. Be safe. They could be warning signs, and it should be a trigger to seek advice, to seek the right type of advice. And similarly with injuries or joint pains that develop is a good example, because our joints are slowly but progressively degenerating. Certainly the soft tissue components are. Our joints are less resilient than they were when we were in our early 20s. Yeah. And there is a greater risk, I suppose, that how we ride, the force we put through the joints, how we interact with the bicycle, how our positions and our postures change as we age in our sedentary office-based lives. What we don't want is injuries to develop, chronic injuries to develop, which could have been managed much earlier. Acute injuries are slightly different, obviously. Yeah. They're managed as they occur. But chronic injuries, or the development of chronic injuries in a midlife athlete, shouldn't be ignored, because there's so much we can do about them.
What Dr. Hulse didn't say is that he is a case study in the Midlife Cyclists book. In a future video, he'll explain he survived a heart attack, had major heart surgery, and yet is now cycling better than before. We'll hear this and more from one of the UK's leading sports cardiologists in a future video. Please subscribe and you won't miss it. And do check out the others in the Older Athlete series.